Homemade sandwich white loaf bread. Here's how to make it. Okay, here are the ingredients you need. Flour, salt, butter, water, sugar, and dry active yeast. You're going to start off by warming up the water to 115 to 120 degrees in Fahrenheit temperature. Dump in your sugar, and then you're going to add in your dry yeast. Stir that to combine. What's going to happen here is the warm water is actually going to help activate the yeast, which means it's going to make it kind of bubbly and frothy. While that's kind of doing its thing, set that aside, combine your flour and your salt, and just whisk that to combine. Super simple there. After 10-15 minutes, your yeast should look like this, kind of frothy, liquidy yeast mixture. Add that into the flour, and then use that whisk to combine just until kind of a rough dough ball forms. It's going to be super kind of wet and moist at this stage, nothing crazy, so just whisk to combine. Then add in some butter. So this was softened butter. I melted it just a little bit to make it simpler, and then stirred that into the dough as well. Again, it's going to be super sticky and wet at this point, so you're going to want to get in there with your hands and kind of start manipulating the dough with your hands a little bit. Do kind of a pull and stretch, fold, and I'll get into more detail about that shortly. If the dough is super wet like it was here, I added in some extra flour just to make it a little bit drier, but it was still very moist overall. The more flour you add in, the actually denser the dough will be and your bread will be, so you're going to be very careful about that. But if it is super wet, add in just a little bit of flour, maybe a quarter cup at a time, just until you can get like a rough dough ball formed here. Once that's formed, you're going to cover it with a wet towel, and this is going to become your first kind of proof, if you will, the first rise. Want to cover that for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. It will double in size, and then bang, degas that dough with a nice solid punch. Get it out onto a floured work surface. The dough should still be very moist and wet at this point, so having a floured work surface is just going to help you manipulate the dough, work with it, and kind of do a pull and fold method here. So what I'm doing is actually pulling the dough out from the side, folding it back into itself in the center. And you want to continuously do this for a solid 10-15 minutes until the dough ball gets taut. All that gluten that you're forming with every stretch is going to get the dough ball get a little bit more taut and a little bit more firm, if you will. After about 10-15 minutes of stretching, I added in a little bit of flour, used a rolling pin to kind of roll out this dough. And the reason why you want to do that is you're going to kind of get it into a rectangular shape and then actually roll the dough into kind of a bread loaf form, because you want it to fit into a bread loaf pan. And once the dough is formed, you want to get a bread loaf pan and actually cover that thing in a ton of butter, or maybe use cooking spray, because you don't want this bread to stick. And the dough is actually going to sit in this pan for another 1.5 hours. Covered with another damp towel. So this is kind of the second rise, the second proof. So you want to do this. The dough is going to rise to about the level of your bread pan, which you'll see here. So now that we have a nice rise going, preheat the oven to 350 degrees, and you're going to cook this bread for about 35-40 minutes until it's golden brown and nicely cooked. Check this thing out. Turned out great. You can hear kind of the crustiness of it. This white sandwich bread was awesome. We enjoyed it. I'll post the full recipe in the description. Enjoy.